very important to have a point of view, the people that is not in the academia to do a transdisciplinary research. This is very important, I think. We never arrive to the act of knowing as a empty vessels. We come to know things with entire world already in our pockets. This is an expression that the Chilean biologist Humberto Maturana every time say that when we are knowing something, you have a background and experience, and this is like programming the way that you are seeing the reality. In this light, for me, incorporating concepts for the popular culture, the social and natural science, the literature and art is urgent and necessary objective in the world in which the information is increasingly enclosed upon by economic and political barriers. So here you can see in this is a graph that I did publish it in my book in Emancipar la Lágrima, all in Spanish. But it's like for this theory of sexual dissidence that has an approach, and transdisciplinary approach, because for me this transdisciplinary is like an activism way of life. Needs to be a lot of combination between the different spheres of knowledge, the cultural popular, the social protest, the biology, of course, the feminism, the art, the literature, the creative, artistic practices, but without this hierarchy that in general the academic imposes. So for me, this is very important. And this is some ideas of what I'm thinking that it's the transfer. In 2029, with Rio Editorial, that is a self-sustaining and independent publisher based in Valparaíso, in Chile, we published the Emancipation of Tears, in Spanish is Emancipar la Lágrima, ensayos transdisciplinarios sobre arte, ciencia y activismo de disidencia sexual, a book that focuses on recent queer South American activism with a transdisciplinary approach. And now I'm planning to show you a video, and in this video I'm read some ideas about the book. This is like a book teaser. You can see the video now. Yes. Okay. Everything is okay.
No. Huh? Now I see the screen black.
Yes, because the video start black, but now you can see.
Okay.
Now?
Yeah. Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So I'm start the video and I'm read some ideas when the video is on. Ravenstein's knowledge, looking by a microscope, looking with different eyes. In the center, a transvestite statue, seated in an armchair, his clothes full of pleats and formal in appearance, elegant and masculine, are still gray. But not just any gray. The transvestite statue has that kind of gray that outdoor monument acquired due to the urban pollution. The years sedimented a salt and somewhat sad appearance upon the statue, which typically depict male hero, cruel men who tell the history of the colonization of the victors. Some statues stand anodized for centuries. Few are source of pride. There are also those which, within the context of social faults, are painted, pulled down, burned, or through into the right. The transvestism of the transvestite statue is not in the gray of its material. It is in the makeup, its color, and accessories. The transvestite statue wears a yellow wig and a green scarf. His face is composed of a large arched eyebrow that remind us the protagonist of the play La Negra Esther, or the activist Hija de Perra. Perhaps the eyebrow of some transvestite character from the play of the Argentinian playwright Copy. Those some eyebrows are crowned open eyes bearing large purple eyelashes. The lips of the transvestite statue and the pen in her right hands are a deep red ridge, which, in contrast to the foundational gray she possesses, seems to stand out even more. If we widen the angle of the shot, if we rotate the lens and enlarge the image of the transvestite statue, we can see the aesthetical intervened coat of arms of the Universidad de Chile in the background. Where the muses Urania and Clio should be, one is able to see two seated bodies, one hooded and the other bearing horns. The ephebes who accompanied them in the original version wear high-heeled shoes, boots, and wigs. This illustration of the transvestite statue, executed with exceptional accuracy and beauty by the artist Gustavo Logio, serves as a queer documentation completing an activist action of sexual dissidence, one whose record is precarious. It hardly exists anymore, only in our memory. The Emancipation of Tears. The title of this book, Emancipar la Lágrima, all through the time I wrote this essay, serves as a phrase that alert me to look for another way of reading the production of identity that put in question the heterosexual regime beyond the lamenting imaginary. Several works and activist action of sexual dissidence, some include in this book, inspired the possibility of thinking of a form of activist justice that will not be associated with the discourse of tears, but will enhance a creative way of denouncing the pain and suffering of patriarchal discipline that our society endures. From this word, the expression emancipar la lágrima became increasingly meaningful as a key point for the strategy and aesthetic on which this book is based. The essays that make up Emancipar la Lágrima are a log of reflection that accompany the work I carry out in the Colectivo Universitario de Disidencia Sexual, whose memory of graphic actions, interventions, book, circuit, and workshop is today shipwrecked among the wave of a social change that put the official dictatorial and neoliberal power present in the country under tension. I'm a biologist who is also shipwrecked in this space. In any case, we always say that we were what the wave of feminism threw up. The majority of the texts in this book are edited versions of essays writing as a result of invitation to seminary, performance, theater and sexual dissident workshop presentation and prologue of book on sexual dissidence in different genres, chronic, essays, playwrights, research, autobiographical fiction. My writing are deeply influenced by my reading of queer and feminist theories who have fascinated me by the capacity of their texts to give theoretical value to aesthetic practices and sexual representation that the art world or social research might decree as a failure, absurd, exaggerated, inaccurate, or erroneous. I brought together this action of activism and reflection raised up at the implantation of Chilean neoliberalism from the vitality of that writing that emerged to record actions, to understand concepts of feminism, transfeminism, and queer theory, to establish positions, and to self-form ourselves. My interest is to contribute with a particular situated knowledge from my reality as a queer biologist who live among cells, bacteria, frog eggs, dissection microscope, and the wide wall of research laboratory, while at the same time belonging to the community of women and sexual dissidents who meet and organize workshops, talk, marches, circuit actions, and writing of sexual dissidents that continue with their transformative desire of our heterosexuality reality. My desire with this book is to rescue a public culture of sexual dissidence because its memory is neither rigid, not moderated, neither completely heroic, not benevolent. It is an exaggerated memory that corresponds to the need to establish a place that doesn't allow itself to be pigeonholed by the measured discourse of a statal discussion on inclusion, same-sex marriage, the stiffness of identity politics, and on the contrary, stir up anarcho-baroque and politic feminist. I hope that this log of text and their image produced in the recent years by artists, theorists, writers, and activists can be a contribution to keeping alive of our memory on the southern shore of the world. So I'm back to the presentation. Okay. You can see the presentation now, no?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Perfect.
As I said, I am a Chilean scientist who was at work focused on cell migration, which means understanding the mechanism by which cells move from one place to another place. Here in the presentation, you can see this is a wound healing assay, and you have here cells that are moving to this empty space, and they are migrating. We know that the cellular migration is a dynamic and regulated process that plays as an essential role in multicellular organisms and is present in different biological processes such as development biology, wound healing assay, and for example, the cancer. This is one of the area that a lot of biologists study the cell migration in the cancer cells. The most traditional approach to studying the cell migration are focuses on a single cell because the biologists in general think that the migration property from a single cell could explain the migration of a tissue, for example. You can see here, this is a human epithelial cells, and you can see how these cells move in this matrix. And here you can see some locomotory structure to the moving of these cells. And for me, it's interesting here to talking about this idea. Like in general, the people in science, for example, think that if you understand the behavior of one cell, you can understand the behavior of the cell that move collectively, but this is not true. Here you can see, and then this is a movie, like for the zebrafish. This is a very classical model for the development biology. And you can see here how a lot of cells are moving together in a collective process. So, and here you can see this is the cell that I'm studying now. That is a neural crest cell, that is a frog cell that produce the central nervous system, and they move collectively. The cells never move like a single cell, they move collectively. And it's different, the process, when the cells move or migrate alone with migrate with another cells. But this way of thinking, this idea of if you understand the property, the migration property for a single cell, you can explain, for example, the movement of that tissue. It's not completely correct because a lot of cells migrate as a collective. And this is important in development and cancer because the processes are very different. And so this is very interesting. And why, in general, we have this idea that if you study one cells, you have the same idea in the collective migration. So now my objective here in London is to study a process, a transition, because the nature is full of different transition. The nature never is static. So this is a transition that is called epithelial mesenchymal transition within the cells, like more epithelial, that is close one on another in this kind of cluster. And these same cells, during a different time, may suffering this transition that make differences in these cells, in these molecules, in the shape of these cells. And now, if you can see the cells that are in a cluster and are very bind one another's, then they acquire more migratory capacity and they separated from this cluster. And this process is very important, for example, in the cancer cells. This is like more a tumor, and the metastasis in general, the cells are more mesenchymal. And in the first step of cancer, they are more epithelial. Or for the formation, for example, of the central nervous system. Some cells, this is very interesting, some cells that we have need to produce a lot of different organs in the organisms. So it's important that these transitions occurs properly. But the question is, why I am talking about cell migration in a queer lecture? Because the knowledge should not be separated. So this is for me the very importance of the transdiscipline. And I know this about from my life in the activism. Because we have to go back and look at the cells, the virus, the microorganism, and molecules once again. Not from this androcentric perspective. For example, this idea like you need to study a single cell and not a collective of the cells. We must to look at the biological life that we have it under a microscope in relation to what is happening in the society where we live. This is very important point for me because I think the disciplinary specialization, like I'm doing now in a postdoc and I did a PhD and an undergrad, so a lot of specialization in the biological area and in a different area, I think it's necessary and it's important. But however, in some time, this separate the sphere of knowledge and in some case make difficult to see the connection between our disciplines. I think this is an issue that is in this idea of the ultra specialization. So it's necessary, but in some case, the specialization is like a problem to talking together, to thinking together. And for me, for example, some question that is a weird question for the science area is like, what does a mode of social organization, for example, an assembly or a protest, teach us about the way in which cells migrate? Or how can the activist collective performance inform us about the migration of the cell? I think we need to change the lens and adjust the aperture. Perhaps for me, but in Spanish, writing and describing in another way can be the possibility to do so. For me, the writing and being with another in an activist collective has been the possibility to answer this question, or to imagine another kind of connection between the science and the performance and the social movement, and the world. Writing, as a feminist have said, enable me to survive in this space where the visibility and the power are in the hands in general of the white heterosexual males. This is word of mine are a way of creating my sexual exile in a predominantly androcentric context. Because I refuse to accept this idea that the biological visuality is only to create a figure to be published in a paper that will be read only by a small group of scientists. I'm like collaborating, working with others, looking at the microscope, which is like my eyes, contemplating galaxy in a bright baroque color, and dreaming for a moment that I am in a cellular transvestite club where the molecules are the singers and their locomotion structures are the accessories that any drag queen would possibly need. The way in which we see the reality, the programming of our gaze, signify for me an obsession, and with the possibility for becoming queer technology. In 2019, Chilean photographer Paz Errázuriz and I published a book called Ojos que no ven, or in English we would Look Not with the Eyes. This book mixed portrait of blind people with biological and poetic text about the gaze. We were very careful, we were vigilant about not taking away the positionality of the blind community, because our goal was to conduct a research on the gaze. This is the main idea. But we presented the work in different places, and when we present the work to some organization of blind community, they told us that it's very important to make visible the invisible world of the blind people. In the book, we write, we are a feminist photographers and activist biology going through the exercise of finding our way toward blindness as a means and as a path, experimented with a transdisciplinary investigation that invites us to get lost. This is listless eyes, this is eyes that don't see, allow us to opposite the normalizing discourse of the gaze, to disobey what they force you to see, to open up the possibility in black and white of other image that don't contain the visual pleasure that the capitalism throw up. This is a book about optical deviation, errors, cloudy vision, and the eyes that fight against the light. Paz Errázuriz is a photographer who lives and works in Santiago de Chile, and she began her career as a self-taught artist in the late 70s, and she documented marginalized communities such as sex workers, psychiatric patients, and circus performance during the military dictatorship in Chile. One of her work, La Manzana de Adán, the Adam Apples, delivers to Chilean activism the very image that we need to build our sexual patrimony. And now I'm going to share with you a video about this work, La Manzana de Adán, that for me is very important for the activists. You can hear the video, no?
Try to play.
This is an essay I did on prostitute trans.
You hear the video?
Perfectly.
Perfect. So now we see this video that is very short, is streaming.
This is an essay I did on prostitute transvestites during the 80s, during the military regime in Chile. It's a work I did for 4 years, more or less. I found out how to get close to a group of women that work in a brothel. And after I've done some long time with them, they made me promise never to show my photographs. I accepted, of course, but I felt frustrated. They introduced me to some friends of theirs that were transvestite prostitutes, and they loved being photographed. I had a fabulous opportunity to start meeting the mother of two of them, which was a woman I admire more in my life, really, for a long time. I dedicate all this work to her. And then I started, living and having a lot of time with them during, of course, this terrible time of curfews that you weren't free to be out most of the time. And it was a natural process. I'm a self-taught photographer. I was experimenting myself. When I went to their rooms, for instance, and of course I gave them photographs, big prints. They had it all decorated with plastic color flowers or plastic papers, decorating these ugly photos. They never liked black and white. They were very generous to me. They invited me to live with them in a brothel when they had to go south of Chile. They had to move because of political reasons. They were constantly being followed by the police. Now I think about that I was very careless in a way. I had small children. I could have been deported. I could have been, really punished very badly. My house had been searched, politically searched with militaries all over. You are very young. You are omnipotent. I have to tell you that at those days was AIDS coming very strong. And in Chile, there wasn't that much information, especially for them. So finally, most of them died of AIDS, except Coral here. She has AIDS, but she takes care of herself well. My subjects were always something nobody asked me to do. Nobody commissioned me anything. It was personal research on me, identity, and myself, and also others.
Oh, qué bueno, papito, me alegro mucho. ¿Cómo está tu amigo?
Está re bien, mi amigo. Ahora acabo de dejarlo en su oficina.
Qué bueno, papito, me alegro mucho. Y conversaron harto, me imagino.
Okay. I'm thinking
conversaron harto, me imagino.
An open mic from somewhere, sí, I don't know.
Hace tiempo que no lo veía, y me reclamaban siempre, así que le dije, ya voy a ir a ver. Ahí almorzamos comida china.
¿Y la Silvita, cómo está su señora? Era, no me acuerdo.
I think you can mute.
Está muy bien.
Yes, excellent. Okay. You can, the host can mute the mic of the party.
But you are the host now. I think you can.
Okay, but now I'm okay. So I'm back to the presentation, and this is my final word. So no worry, because I'm almost finished. Okay, this is This is one of the photographs from Paz Errázuriz from the La Manzana de Adán. Because I think my desire to explore this discipline is likewise fueled by the fact that we grew up formed by a group of feminists like Paz Errázuriz that survived the bloody Chilean dictatorship and who trained as self-taught artists and theorists in the space other than or outside of the academia. We know about the sexual dissident, about this from this woman that are not in the academia in this very difficult time in the dictatorship, because they are in the bar, in the march, in the protest, in the street, and thereby producing another kind of queer public culture. Because I think this work of Paz Errázuriz is our sexual patrimony. We are queer thanks to this transvestite photograph that queer our retina, our eyes, and the way we see. And this is interesting to me because you can see here some images that are from different protests or important day for the LGBT community in Chile. And the people put their image of the La Manzana de Adán in their protest, in the social media, it's our image about the queer people, queer persons. So this image is very important because it's not only for the artistical world, is also very important for the activists because we recognize in this image like our patrimony or our sexual patrimony. And this is my last word. Queer with Q was born as a protest, but became an identity, Queer with C translate the icon of queer theory into Spanish, but they do not express a lot of interest in other space outside the spheres of the academic power. Queer with K between the punk and Quechua is an irony. It's an exaggerated culture that reads queer theory maybe in another sense, maybe with a lot of misunderstanding. Queer is a party in the context of terror. Lo queer, or that which is queer for us, is an invitation to create more creative space and way of thinking, and other way of thinking from the landscape of the unfair. So thank you for your attention, for being here, and that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Jorge. So beautiful. Like I want a loud clap. I'm always like mesmerized of how your mind works. It's like that true transdisciplinary approach that you share with us. I know there's only so much things that I would like to discuss from your political reflection.